Mr. Jovanovic, thank you for your time and for the interview for Diplomacy and Commerce.
Thank you for having me.
Bearing in mind that U.S. International Development Finance Corporation deals in, why did it take so long to open a branch here in the region, and have the necessary conditions been met only now?
So maybe it's helpful if I explain a little bit about how the Development Finance Corporation, or DFC, came about. So it was an idea that originated actually under the Obama administration, which was to create a proper American development bank, akin to what our counterparts have, to work together to achieve some of our development goals globally. So think of EBRD, EIB, IFC, and countless others. So the idea was to take OPIC, which has been very active around the globe, including in the region for decades, combine it with some development credit agency that was previously within USAID, and combine it. But it passed Congress and was authorized in 2018 with bipartisan support. And what it did a couple of things that were quite important. One, it doubled the size of the balance sheet available to DFC from 30 billion to 60 billion. Two, and quite importantly, especially for this part of the region, it took away the requirement that any transaction or project in which we participate solely have American involvement. So now we can participate in projects that have international involvement, where those companies or counterparts share our values. That happened simultaneously with something quite important, and most important for Croatia. Look, we're sitting in a high-income country, a member of the European Union, a stable, tried-and-true ally of the United States. Typically, under normal circumstances, our development work and our investment and financial support we couldn't do here. However, with congressional authorization, as part of our desire to spur energy cooperation, both within the region and then transatlantically, in the energy sector, DFC is able to be active in the region. And that, by and large, is the motivation for my trip to Zagreb and our work here in Croatia.
Okay, I have planned to ask you about Zagreb and Croatia later.
Sure.
Actually, yes, as an American development bank...
Well, I'm sorry, I don't think I answered your question on the regional bit. So DFC only began work in late 2019. And it was part of the plan was to really start to think about different regions in the world as coverage areas, akin to all other IFIs or other development institutions around the globe. As part of the economic normalization agreements that were reached at the White House between Kosovo and Serbia, this administration saw in DFC the potential to, help both of those countries broaden the financial tools available to them to realize their commitments under the economic normalization agreements. And so that really helped the Western Balkans and AEGIAN come to the forefront, and hence the regional place. But this is the first proper regional office, regional presence anywhere. We've had investment officers elsewhere around the world, but this is the beginning of what we hope to follow, which will be other regional offices and regional coverage for DFC.
Okay. As an American development bank that cooperates with the private sector, how interesting do you think that Western Balkan is to U.S. companies? We have history here, for example, and you said now you have just begun. We can explain that maybe that way.
Sure. As I mentioned a moment ago, some of the near-term goals are heavily oriented towards helping Kosovo and Serbia realize under the economic normalization agreement. However, a key sector focus for us and a key development theme is energy security, energy diversification. And you quite perfectly pointed out that our unique toolkit is geared towards catalyzing private sector investment, private sector capital. In Croatia, a regional security and a regional energy diversification story has to start with a leader, and it is truly a regional story. A lot of the countries in the region are too small to think about a sustainable energy future as it pertains to natural gas in particular and LNG, but even down the line with some of the renewables advancements, regional economic cooperation will be crucial to realize those goals. Croatia has realized and has a proof of concept in Krk, in the LNG facility, which is obviously meant to go live in January of 2021. And Sure. There's tremendous growth potential there. Is it a smaller scale project as far as global standards are concerned? Sure. But you've demonstrated a proof of concept. You've done it. Others have talked about it, and you've done it. And so the motivation behind this visit is to say, okay, you've done this. This is a wonderful achievement. You now have this growth potential, and you have the potential to emerge as an energy leader in the region. Let's talk about that. How can we do that? How can we help you do that? Most importantly, how can we mobilize American private sector? It's a good question. With regards to energy projects, if you think about, it's as much of a story about the United States as it is about Croatia or the region. We're the world leader in shale, and there's a tremendous amount of private capital that's been invested in expanding LNG export capacity in the United States Gulf Coast. There's technical know-how, there's capacity, and there's capability. And there's also a desire in this low interest rate environment to find, on a risk-reward basis, attractive financial returns. And so DFC could be the tip of the spear in mobilizing some of that capital by way of some of our direct investment products, which are energy eligible, right? So oftentimes there are projects in the region, Croatia is no exception, where they're attractive, they make sense. There is a common equity sponsor, someone who's willing to lose money first. That's a project sponsor. It's attractive enough to bring in bank financing. But there's oftentimes there's a shortfall in capital. And that risk capital shortage is where we'd like to play a role. Ideally, I'd like to work myself out of a job in Zagreb and in Croatia and mobilize enough private capital to entirely render us not necessary.
Okay, you mentioned the relations between Serbia and Kosovo. We are now here in Zagreb, Croatia. How big are the differences in the region when we talk about business and how you can where is the most what do you think, where you think the exist most room are for progress the most? For example, in Serbia, in Kosovo, in Croatia, in Bosnia, maybe.
I think about it quite differently. I think the biggest potential is for increased regional cooperation at every level, not just Kosovo, Serbia, but across the board. Each of the countries has a unique set of challenges. Likewise, each has a unique opportunity set. Many of those opportunity sets overlap. And so I think we'll gauge the success of DFC's initiative in, as we work closely with our European counterparts and other development banks, finding ways to increase the number of jobs here, help these economies in these countries keep their talented young people here to realize their dreams, build their stories, build their companies on the ground here, and be a catalyst, even at a local, at a technical level, for more regional cooperation, because you see more value in a shared future than you do in arguing about the past.
Who can apply for the funds? Is this only on state level or some companies, individuals, for your projects, for your budget?
Again, in Croatia, I think our toolkit is much better geared towards the private sector. However, a lot, particularly in the energy space, there's still a heavy guidance, leadership involvement on the part of the public sector. So for that reason, many of our consultations and introductory meetings, and that's what they are, these are introductory, right? I'm never going to understand, especially at the outset, the opportunity set as well as people on the ground, both in government and in the private sector. And so getting to know each other, getting to better understand where these opportunities will arise, I think we're ideally in a high-income country like Croatia, geared towards the private sector.
What is that DFC insists on when investing?
There are
most important for you.
Look, we want to find, on the one hand, we want to find deals that make economic sense. And so we're here to catalyze and to help realize projects that, by and large, make financial and economic sense. On the other hand, we're a development bank, a development agency, and with a very robust development criteria. And so what are things we really like to see? Key development goals of ours. 1, job creation. 2, female empowerment. We want to support initiatives that help empower women, employ women, see women in the leadership positions they deserve. It's called 2X. And there are other key growth and development criteria that we have. Environmental, certainly, because especially as projects fall into certain categories of work, there's in-depth environmental and social impact review. there's public comment. There's a very keen development compass to everything we do.
As a development corporation, how much funds have you secured for the region?
There's no minimum and there's no maximum. So it's very much opportunity set driven. And so, again, in other parts of the region where we have more development goals, there are actually smaller scale projects that we think could make a tremendous impact, all the way up to larger projects that are larger scale that will require more capital. But our framework isn't, we're allocating this much to a region. Within that, we're allocating this much to a country, this much to a sector. It's opportunity driven, which is why conversations like the ones we had in Zagreb today are so crucial. Introducing ourselves, better understanding where we can work together. We'll curate a deal pipeline the way we would in the private sector.
Except the plan you mentioned, actually, Kirk, what are the planned projects for Croatia? What project maybe you have more? You met people from government, for some ministers here. What you talk about?
I think it's too soon for us to identify a specific project. I've met these people for the first time today, but there are starting to crystallize and sharpen our view of certain sectors, and again, energy being a crucial one, is extremely helpful. And so, although these are state-run, state-sponsored projects, right now, they're rightly so, they're focused on executing their project, because there's no use talking about future growth unless you can deliver on your commitments today. And so they very kindly took time, though, in their busy schedules to start to have this conversation. But in my experience in the private sector, once you get through those first few months of operations and you work out the very short-term problems, you very quickly start thinking about the future and setting up those open lines of communication as they start to have those thoughts. And hopefully our team in the region gets better up to speed on the opportunity set. We hope those two paths meet in the middle.
Okay, finally, for the end, maybe you know the answer. What is the key message for successful business? Is there any secret key?
In my experience, it's been investing in your know-how and your team and your people. And high-quality people that share an ethical point of view, that share values, that really care about doing a good job together is crucial. And so I think that's where more American involvement and the spreading of, capital is largely becoming commoditized around the world, right? Especially as interest rates stay so low. But high-quality partners with know-how, with shared vision and shared value for the future, I think that's crucial. So you want to work with partners that, especially as they come and invest here, multinationals, that hire local people, that help develop local supply chain, that leave with their work a positive impact on know-how, knowledge, and society.
And one more question. What is the biggest...
You said that one was the final one. I'm kidding.
What is the biggest problem here when we talk about business in the whole region, all countries? Do you maybe have the one same problem? People minds or, the legislation or something?
Like each country has its own challenges and its own road to reform, right? And you're very fortunate here in Zagreb. By the way, the entire region is fortunate. The U.S. ambassadors here are so driven, so committed. They are your biggest champions and your biggest advocates, both here in Europe and at home in Washington. And so I know Embassy Zagreb here and our wonderful ambassador has been pushing for judicial reforms and improvement in administrative efficiencies, etc. By and large, that exists everywhere around the world, but this is a shared problem. But I would say, and look, it's hard for me with anything I'm doing to help push those along. However, one thing that I think is worth the entire region thinking about is turning around and facing each other as a real opportunity for economic cooperation, even at the micro level, because the businesses by and large are already doing it. But thinking about economic prosperity, and that doesn't necessarily mean, forgetting your differences or your cultural identities, your linguistic identities, or your sovereignty, but seeing the true value in better trading with each other, better cooperating with each other, building an economic future together.
Good message for the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.